It sounds like Neotropolis. It's
High level of immersion is definitely one of those things that is recommended. We wanted to be those heroes of the resistance. The level of immersion is totally choose your own adventure.
Alex. We have crossed paths several times at various flow arts festivals, and I have always been impressed with your performances and your flow, especially when it comes to fans. So I am so glad to have you here, and welcome to the show.
Yay, thank you. I'm super excited to be here as well. I have a lot of exciting things to share, as you know, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
No, absolutely. Super happy to have you. So you blend the world of cyberpunk and flow arts together along with your strong story-driven narrative shows, and this is all done with your crew, Ninja X Machina. How did you first get involved?
So it really started with our core group of friends, including Xander Paris, Laranya, Sunmi, a couple other people. Sunmi wasn't in there in the beginning, but has quickly joined because she realized how exciting this has been. But it has started with basically we all had this vibe of we loved watching anime. We loved, just like ninja arts in general. We saw these characters as like people that we wanted to be when we were older because of how like strong they were. We all came from like kind of similarly hard backgrounds in different ways and had to go through like a lot of adulting early on in our lives. And so these anime characters and these cyberpunk characters, it seemed to us, at least to me, the world of cyberpunk it's set in a dystopian future. And I felt very much the same as the characters in these animes and in these movies, of feeling just kind of like growing up in a society where like a lot of things are decided for you. And so I related heavily to these characters. And when you add in like ninja arts or samurais or, whatever, it's like all these characters are going through these trials and tribulations. And throughout it all, they're either finding themselves and the resolve within themselves to get things done or like achieve a goal or save somebody. And it just was something that was just so inspiring to me as I was, growing up through my formative years. I never liked anything that was, so to say, normal. I loved bright colors. I loved Japanese fashion from like a very, very young age. I loved the fact that people, followed what they really liked themselves and didn't really care what other people thought. And because of that confidence, like they just portrayed it in such a way that was just super inspiring to me. I felt like I was like very shy as a kid. Like I was very socially anxious. And so our group, Ninja X Machina, we all kind of like came together in the flow community that way. I feel like a lot of people in the flow community have a lot of social anxiety or ADHD or, whatever, some sort of thing that they're dealing with internally. And that's kind of why we all gravitate to flow arts. And I feel like that flow arts is just like an intense moving meditation. It gives us something to strive for, to work on, to, express ourselves creatively. And we all kind of shared that when we created Ninja X Machina. The first time we decided that we wanted to make it a thing, Laranya had just gotten back from Neotropolis the first year that they threw the festival. And just to kind of give you like a background, Neotropolis is kind of like a Ren Fair on crack. It's way more immersive. Think like burner festival in the middle of the desert. that includes, you know, all these different missions that you can go on to, like, during the festival. For an example, you can run like errands for different factions at the festival. So you got like your corporations, so you got your resistance factions, like you've got your AI factions where it's like a bunch of AI robots that are working in a faction and you're trying to, you know, hack systems for them. And they have like all these really awesome immersive things at Neotropolis. So Lyra comes back and tells us all about this. And of course, multiple of us are like, oh my gosh, there's a specific cyberpunk event. And you don't really see a lot of it. Like, it's recently becoming more and more popular. But a lot of times you see like your post-apocalyptic. The same people that run Neotropolis also run a festival called Wasteland Weekend, which has been going on for at least a decade. So same people that do Neotropolis do Wasteland Weekend, and they do, you know, a Mad Max themed festival. That one has been going on for years now. You see a lot of fairy festivals. You see a lot of just like Ren Fair in general. But you don't really see cyberpunk. And when we heard about Neotropolis, we were like, we have to be a part of this. We have to go full force into this. Like we need to lift this community up because it doesn't have a lot of exposure. And I feel like a lot of people, you know, it's funny because a lot of the animes that we watched growing up, like Ghost in the Shell or, you know, just similar things like that. A lot of them actually take place because of how old they were. They were, you know, the 80s and 90s where they had these cyberpunk settings or whatever. It was actually set in the future, and it's set in 2020, like in the 2020s. And so at this point, like by those estimations, we should be further technologically. And so I think it's important that we try to, you know, as like a genre and as like a community and a lover of all things cyberpunk, I'm like, how can I make everything cyberpunk? How can I add all of that into it? And so we decided on doing this performance crew. And one of the things that we see a lot of the time in performance and flow arts is like there's a lot of exposition of skill. I myself love performances with storyline. I like to feel like I am watching a production, you know. I'm a little spoiled being in the flow community because I've seen all these different tricks and things done on a regular basis. Granted, I can't do all of them, but it makes it more interesting to me as a viewer to have something to connect to within a performance. And so we decided to write this performance for Neotropolis, and they've never really had a performance like this before. But we pitched them our idea. And so basically our first performance was us being unveiled as like this new resistance weapon. And we were these cybernetically enhanced ninjas that this crazy mad scientist created and experimented on so that we would have a force against all the corporations at Neotropolis. A huge cyberpunk theme is that the corporations got their boot on you and they control everything. And we're kind of seeing that in today's, but without all the cool cyberpunk things.
A boring dystopia.
Yeah, boring dystopia, exactly. And so we wanted to be those heroes of the resistance. And so we wrote it as if our performance was our DJ, Damien. He's the one that did all of our music and stuff for the performance. He plays the mad scientist, and he is unveiling us at a resistance rally. And so each of our solos within the performance, he like does this huge speech about how we need to rise up against the corporations. And each one of our solos as we step forward is like an introduction of like who that ninja is, and Damien is speaking while we're performing and to the music, and giving context for each ninja's specialty. And in the process of doing this, each of our, exhibition of our skills is flow moves. And so we each have different props that we use. I use primarily fans throughout the performance. I do dabble in a little bit of dragon staff during the performance. But, Xander does equal counterweights and nunchucks. And then Lyra does nunchucks and swords. And her partner, Daniel, does swords. And we all, in Ko also does flow fins and booging. And so we had a huge array of different props that we use throughout the performance. And it kind of goes with the vibe of each of our characters as well. And my character specifically was kind of like what you would call a kunoichi. So like in ninja lore, a usually female ninja who is undercover as either like a maid or like somebody within the castle that no one has no idea is an assassin, basically. And they use their wit and their speech and their skill to gain intel or carry out assassinations. And so that's what my character, SuccubusLux, is my name of my character. That's what she basically does within Neotropolis, is going to all the bars and working as go-go dancers and all these different things to gain intel from all these different gang members or, all these different corporation heads. And so that's how we gain intel as Ninja X Machina. And the lore for our characters and our performance it goes so deep. And we've basically written ourselves into the festival lore. And, that's the great thing about Neotropolis is like anyone can contribute to this festival. Anyone can bring their art. Anyone can make a story and make it part of the city. And I thought that was such a cool experience because you have all these different minds coming together over a shared interest of cyberpunk and all these different ideas and, things that you wouldn't even thought of doing as like an idea for a cyberpunk setting. Basically, the cyberpunk setting is just the normal world, but everything is future. So you've got, we've been joking about like cyberpunk bellhops or like cyberpunk sushi chefs or whatever, and everybody at this festival brings like a weird unique thing to the world and helps build the world of Neotropolis. And so that's what our performance was about. We basically get unveiled as like this resistance hero group, and the audience watching us are people that are, coming to the rally and trying to fight against the corporations. And we added a really cool touch the first year. We actually had, so at Neotropolis, they have people dressed up in like cyberpunk military gear, and they're called the Sentinels, and it's basically like a military state police. And so we worked it out with the people that play the Sentinels at the festival to show up at the end of our performance to break up the rally. And so we just did our best to include as much of the immersive lore building within our performance. A lot of the people at Neotropolis, you have like go-go dancers and, performers for DJ sets that you see. But a lot of these people aren't from the flow world. A lot of these people are from the cosplay world or the Hollywood prop industry or, just, people that love cyberpunk. And so we wanted to bring a show to Neotropolis that shows flow exhibition and all the different things that we could do with it. And, for the flow artists that were there, outside of the performance, we wanted to be like, hey, you can make a performance like this. You can make a storyline. You can make it more interesting than just the things that you are doing physically with your props. And it received so much good feedback, to the point where this year, unfortunately, I couldn't go, but I'll get to that later. This year, they, like, after a performance last year, they told us that we needed to immediately come back. Like, don't even worry about sending in a video. Like, you guys need to come back. And we just brought a really, really awesome touch of performance. And it just was just really well received by everyone. And it was a lot of fun to make too. And like all the different, as we're making the performance, we got to sit on Zoom calls with everyone because half of our group is in Canada. So we got to build lore with each other as friends and be like, hey, what do you think about this idea? And how like this person could get taken over or hacked because they're, a robot. And so somebody hacks into the system and that like determines, what happens in the performance and stuff. And so we actually wrote in one of the missions you can do as a festival goer is hack this system. And that changed the outcome of what happened in our performance.
That's cool.
Yeah. So basically, if enough people hacked this system, they were able to decide at what time that the Sentinels, you would hear their radio chatter on our system. And you hear Damien, the mad scientist, say, oh my gosh, they got through our firewalls. How did they do that? And that was directly linked to one of the missions you could do as a festival goer. Damien was able to do that because he wrote part of the missions for the quest masters as a volunteer position. And so he had connections to that. So we were able to include that in our performance. We want, like, with our performance, we want people to feel like they are in another world, like they are being transported to another place. And I think, it being cyberpunk, it was just so easy for us to, include the audience and figure out ways to, make this as immersive as possible. And as the end of the show happened and the Sentinels break up our rally, we don't even stand up at the front. We are like running off of stage and people thought we were going to, take a bow or say thank you or whatever. And we just exit like ninjas. We put our hoods on and some of us walked into the crowd to try to like sneak away from the Sentinels. And you can see some of us running in the background, with our lights on to our like rendezvous. And we all like had a rendezvous point in one of the other clubs in the city. And we like rendezvoused there. And we had people coming up and being like, we saw you guys rendezvous after your exit with the Sentinels. And like, it was just so much fun to play pretend, And it was like, as kids, I feel like now people don't play pretend enough. They don't tap into their inner child enough. And like, now that we're adults, we're like, okay, we have all these responsibilities and bills, but when do we have time to play? And so we made time to play because we know how nourishing it is and how nourishing it is for other people to experience it too.
Oh, that's fantastic. I have so many questions. So
yes,
it sounds like Neotropolis, it's like a Burning Man festival in terms of the spirits, the location. It's in the Mojave Desert as opposed to Black Rock, but desert. But it sounds like the thing that separates it is so much more immersive. Can you describe the level of immersion that's there? Like, is someone putting on a character the entire time, or do you occasionally break and be like, oh my God, I saw you doing this. That was amazing. How did you make that costume? Like, what's the level of immersion that someone would typically experience there?
So high level of immersion is definitely one of those things that is recommended. to have the best experience. But, you know, like every person that comes to the festival cannot dress up as a specific character from any sort of media. That is completely off the table.
Interesting.
Yeah, so everyone is forced to create an original character, which builds to the immersion of it being a real cyberpunk city. There's no lightsabers. There's no like, there's things from like the Cyberpunk 2077 game, but not specific characters. And so the whole point of the festival is you create a character, and you give them a backstory. And when you're in the city, like the city part of the festival, you have to be in costume. It doesn't have to be a high level of costume, but it has to be some sort of costuming. You can't just walk in with a t-shirt and shorts.
Right, yeah.
You have to have some sort of accessory to make it feel cyberpunk. And so it really adds to that immersion factor. Everyone that you talk to in the festival will start as their character in conversation. And then there's kind of like some social cues of like, I'm not really feeling this role play right now. Or sometimes you can even just say that. And you can just have a normal conversation of, you know, with people. But most of the time, people will approach every conversation in character. And I think it's like, it's not like, oh, you're bad festival goer if you don't act in character the whole time. It's more so an invitation to be silly, or an invitation to be fun, like have a fun conversation going on. You know, and it's like people will be talking about like how long the trip was, and they'll be like, yeah, I'm so happy that I'm planet side finally. That cryo chamber really, you know, made me stiff in my back. And so like people kind of like pick up on like, oh yeah, that was a really long drive for you. I totally get that. And people play along. And if you're not feeling it, they'll just start talking to you normally. There's a couple different things as far as like immersion. There's a sake bar there that you could go to, and everything is pretty much, for the most part, minus some of the food vendors, it's very much burn style bartering, where like some of the food places are free, some of the alcohol places are free, and you kind of just go. There is a specific sake bar where they have really high-end sake, but in order to get a shot of sake, you have to barter for it, and you have to role play barter for it. Like it could be like in the real world, like a small item, but you have to role play it up to make it seem like it is something sought after in the cyberpunk universe. And so you talk with the bartender, and he's like speaking some Japanese and some English, and has like a heavy accent and a kimono on, and there's neon lights behind him. And he's like, well, why should I give you a sake shot? And you have to trade him something for it. And the more, it's kind of like being in a Neotropolis reminds me of RPG video game.
Yeah.
Where you have quite a bunch of different like dialogue options, and you kind of have to figure out what those dialogue options are by having conversation in character. And so certain things, if you say the right phrase, or you gain charisma points with that NPC, which is actually another person, they'll let you into like a speakeasy, or you'll get like a one-of-a-kind data chip that somebody made out of like clear cut acrylic, and it's like neon or whatever, and like they're not just giving it away unless you say the special words or like the phrase that you're supposed to, say that you're on a mission. And the level of immersion, it's totally choose your own adventure. Like you could just go and listen to music and hang out with friends and whatever. But then you can also go even further than that and do missions and be involved with different factions. And there's a bounty hunting system where like festival goers come to the bounty hunter, and each of those people that goes to the bounty hunter is also being another person being hunted. So all the festival goers are literally looking for each other throughout the festival. And you just have like really cool, like one-off things that happen, like random little fake knife fights between gangs in the streets, or, like there's a prison break from like the corporate, jail or whatever, or you get put into a prison cell by like the sentinels. And it's just like very, very much so what you want to choose, how immersed you get. I highly recommend being as immersive as possible because it is literally like living in a video game. It's super awesome, and the people are super safe. We have paramedics, and like the safety factor of everything is just so good. Like this is the first festival I've been to where I felt like truly, truly safe, and able to be the silly child that I am with no issues. It was like a really super immersive experience. Even if Cyberpunk is not your thing, I highly recommend doing it because I have not had an experience at a festival like this ever, not even run fairs. It's definitely something I urge everyone to do.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely gonna have to check that out. I spent most of this morning researching it for this interview, and just the content that comes out of it is so cool. I saw like the teaser demo reel for 2023, and it looks amazing. Just the craftsmanship and the cosplays, the music, the scenery, the environment, just all of it is taken up to the max, and it looks so cool. I think you touched on something really interesting, that as adults, we never really take the time to play. Like, the stereotypical version of relaxation is like, oh, let's hop on a plane and go to a beach somewhere for a week, and then we get to come back to life and do it all over again. Whereas something like this, it really is an escape. You get to kind of put reality off to the side for a little bit and be immersed in this amazing cyberpunk world. I also think the quests and just the small interactions by being immersive and by playing a character is really cool because it adds to the complexity of your experience. So this is different than something like a music festival, to where you have the band list and you have the various stages and the schedules, and it's a rigid structure. You go, everyone watches the same thing, and then you go do something else. Now, I'm sure there are scheduled shows at Neotropolis, but it's all those little moments in between big events to where you can kind of, be your character and have these little interactions, like a knife fight with someone, or pursuing a quest to go capture someone else, or bartering with the sake master. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it really is. I cannot like stress this enough. I have never been to anything like this in my entire life. And I am in the Flow community here in Portland and surrounded by circus artists and clowns on a regular basis. And we do not have a single event here that is as immersive as this one. And everybody is just so passionate about it. And like everybody that goes, that even if Cyberpunk isn't their thing, like they also ride the high of the passion of others. So like everybody is putting in all this like energy and effort to make this a real world, and like the world building is just so intense. Like it's amazing because it's like when you play a video game with a really good storyline and you are just like immersed in it in the game and you're like feeling for these characters, except this time it's actual people. They're real people. You get to like hug and talk and laugh and like experience it like for yourself. You're not just third personing it. And yeah, it's just absolutely incredible. I have no other words. I could talk about this for hours on end. And if you're in Portland, you've heard me talk about this for hours on end. And you've seen how excited our crew gets about this. It is so awesome. So awesome. And because of this experience, we want to bring Ninja X Machina to other events. Like we want to share that immersiveness to people and show people like it's okay to be a cyberpunk ninja if you want to be. Like we're all in our 30s.
Yep.
We have day jobs.
Yep.
And then on our off time, we're cyberpunk ninjas. It's absolutely doable, you know? We're lucky to have a flow community as silly. And, you know, we always practice what I call the sacred silly, which is practicing that inner child, you know, and practicing being fun and not caring that people think you might look stupid, you know, because it's not about looking stupid or how people perceive you. It's about how much fun you are having and how much fun you are using to nourish your soul. And so every year that we've worked with Ninja X Machina, this was the last year or the second year that we did a performance. We have grown our story more and more and more. And now there's more backstory to each of our characters. And like now we have different villains that we're fighting. And just like in anime or like, you know, a shonen from an anime, you know, anime scene, whatever, you have a list of characters that you're following. And as we are progressing through our normal everyday lives, we are also adding details from that into our character lives as well. And so we want to show the community that there's not just, you know, fairies and knights and, you know, all of these things here. There's also like cool futuristic stuff too. And I feel like Portland is a great place to start that. I mean, EUCs, the electric unicycles, are everywhere. That is so futuristic. That is so cyberpunk. And I'm like, we need more cyberpunk events here. I will sign a petition to get more if that's what I need to do. And so we want to bring our performance to the community and figure out ways to share that with people and maybe spark that interest in others as well and show them how exciting it can be and how fun it is and how liberating it is to play a character.
Yeah.
So
speaking of communities, you mentioned the flow art community in Portland. How did you get into flow arts to start, and then how did you link up with the Portland community?
Oh, okay. So the first time I lived in Oregon, I lived in Corvallis. I had gone through not the greatest relationship at the time. I was with them for 3 years. And the one thing that I saw while I was living in Corvallis was somebody spinning fire. And it was not even somebody I knew. And I remember watching someone spin fire for the first time and be completely enamored. I knew at that moment, like, I would, like, my mouth was open, my jaw was dropped. I was like, that is so badass. That is so cool. And they look like they're having so much fun. And so I realized in that moment that I needed to nourish myself because this relationship that I was in was sucking my soul. It was really damaging to me. And so I started watching all these videos on different fire props and flow props on YouTube. I can't even remember if it was any particular person that I was watching out of it, but I remember watching these videos and I just fell in love with fire fans and the fluidity of it and the gracefulness of it. And this was before I'd seen any really like techie moves with fans. I was watching primarily Russian fan spinners. And I remember seeing the different moves that they were doing, and it looked almost like the light trails from the flame looked like there was like a dragon wrapping around the person's body. because they were doing all these behind the back weaves and behind the head weaves, and it was just trailing in this way that I was like, that is so cool. And it looks like an anime character with a superpower of some sort. And I remember the first time I ever practiced fans, I had taken 2 clothes hangers and I taped them together so that like the triangle part of the clothes hanger was like the fan.
Yeah.
And then the part that hung on the rack, the hook, was now a ring because I had 2 of them taped together.
Yep.
And so I was using 2 for one fan and 2 for the other fan. And I remember I was living in a garage at the time. I was renting a space in a garage, and I was like spinning these like hangers on my fingers and trying to learn these different moves because I didn't know where to buy fire props. I had no idea where to even begin. I'm like, I just see this thing and I think it's really cool. And I didn't know really anybody at that point in the community. And I was just trying to teach myself this thing on my own because I just happened to stumble upon it. And then from then on, I kind of like forced myself to talk to the people that I saw spinning, and kind of, which was very hard for me because I was very isolated at that point and I had massive social anxiety. And then I ended up, through talking to these people that I met, getting my own pair of fire fans. And then shortly after that, about 6 months after I got my first set of fans, I ended up having to move back home to California, and I wanted to like recoup and kind of just find myself and kind of start over in life at my family's house. And so I took a break from flow arts for 3 years, and I put a lot of energy and effort into creating a career for myself in veterinary medicine, as an assistant, and animal care as an assistant. And so I just kind of like really put a lot of energy into that for 3 years. Fast forward, one of the people that I ended up having mutual friends with in the community ended up being Xander, and we ended up talking on Facebook because we saw each other commenting on friends' posts. And at that point, my reach in the Portland community was very small, especially because I had moved back to California. And from that point of Xander and I commenting on each other's statuses on Facebook, it became video calls and phone calls, and it ended up that, you know, like we were talking to each other about people that we were dating and all this stuff. And then we realized that we talked to each other more than anybody else in our lives.
Classic.
And so then it like my reignition basically into the Portland flow community was I visited Xander a few times in Portland. He took me to a couple different events. And then this is when we had first started dating long distance. And then he proposed the crazy idea that I come move to Portland, and that he had a room for me in Portland. And we continued to date, and I moved in with him, and we've been together for 3 years since.
Cool. Yeah.
And through that, he introduced me to all these amazing people in Portland. If you guys don't know who Xander Paris is, he is pretty well connected within like the martial flow art props, known for nunchuck and rope dart, and has taught various workshops. So he has met so many different people all over the country and all over the world regarding flow arts. And it was because of him that I have also met all these amazing people. And he's been my motivator and my biggest supporter in terms of like, you should go spin. And because like I used to have such bad anxiety. I hated flowing in front of other people. I thought I looked stupid. I thought I didn't have as much skill, and I might not have had as much skill at that point, but there was only one way I was going to get better. And that was doing it in front of other people and, you know, skill sharing with other people and asking others how they did that certain move and not being afraid of that. I still have a little bit of social anxiety, but I'm a lot better at, you know, approaching people. And when I've kind of now slightly stepped into the role of like, when I see new flomies, like baby flomies, starting flow, they kind of like come to me and they're like, wow, you look so great out there. And I remember how I felt when I was first starting out, being way too scared to talk to people. And so like when I see people come up to me that are brand new and they like ask me something, I am like immediately like, how can I help? What do you want to know? How can I help you? You look great. And I'm just like as supportive as possible, because it is so scary to get out there in front of other people so that you can do something that feels good for yourself, which is insane. Like flow arts is for yourself, not for others. Like, yeah, you can do it for other people, but at the end of the day, we do it for ourselves. And trying to remember that when you go out into the fire circle is so hard to remember, because there's all these people looking at you. And most of the time, they're not judging you, you know, they're out there cheering you on and be like, heck yeah, you know, you get it. And like, that's my favorite part about flow arts, is like wholesome heckling your friends. And by wholesome heckling, I mean like telling your friends how good they look out there and like, look how cool he is, or look how cool they are. Or, like, they look so good. And like even doing that to people you don't know. On another tangent, I want to run a workshop at some point, literally called Wholesome Heckling, and it's how to gain consent from others in terms of heckling and how to do it in a way that is supportive and uplifting. Because I feel like it's very easy to say the wrong thing with wrong people that you may not know as well as you think you did. But yeah, the flow arts community, especially in Portland, everyone's so freaking supportive. Everyone I've met, honestly, in the flow community has been super supportive and awesome.
Yeah. I delved into the flow arts community here in Seattle in December of 2021. So it's been about, I don't know, 2.5, 3-ish years. But like you said, everyone is so welcoming and supportive and amazing. Just, you know, when I was starting out, granted, I had a bit of a martial arts background. So like I knew how to flow pretty easily because you just light it on fire and it's more or less the same thing. But just getting the courage to walk out and spin in the fire circle, everyone was just extremely supportive. People let me borrow props. I got to ask for tips and tricks. If I didn't know how to do something, there was like 4 people rushing like, oh, this is how you do it. And I've just never felt so welcome. Because, you know, like you were saying, being a beginner, I don't know, a baby flow me, it's hard and it's challenging. You don't really know what to expect. You don't know what you're doing. You look at some just gods among people, like you look at Rager Rabbit doing their dragon staff, or you look at Xander doing poi, or you doing fans. Like you see the skill there and you're like, I could never get there. But also, like you said, it takes the diligent practice and the support from your community and investing in yourself to graduate up the skill ranks and eventually get to that point. You mentioned a really interesting thing about, you know, encouraging the new people. A story from a writer friend of mine. They were running some writing workshop, and there was this girl who finished the assignment a little bit early, and she was drawing. So my friend walked over and she said, wow, I think your drawing is really, really cool. I love how you did, you know, X, Y, and Z, just the details of the drawing. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it was just a quick, you know, passing comment, nothing of significance. But a couple of years later, that girl came back to my friend and she said, hey, you know, that comment meant a lot to me. I was actually on the cusp of thinking about quitting drawing and just putting it on the shelf entirely because I didn't think I was any good. And it was your comments, you know, as offhand and not important as you think it might be, it meant a lot to me. Mm-hmm. So I recognize these things in the flow arts community too, of if someone is spinning for the first couple of times and they're running into challenges, just that little bit of acknowledgement and that little bit of encouragement can go so much farther than you think it does. Out of curiosity, what drew you to fans in the first place, as opposed to like swords or poi or staff?
Oof. Honestly, I loved the versatility of it. In terms of like, if you want to do cool patterns and flowers and weaves and, cool light trails, whatever, you could do that. But specifically fans, like, I love music and I love dancing and I love singing. And I felt like fans was just, it was naturally what my body wanted to do. And it gives you the ability to dance with a prop. Whereas like with poi, like you have a string that you're trying to keep momentum on. And same with like contact staff, you have to keep momentum on it in order to get certain things done and certain tricks, achieved. And I felt like fans was just one of those things that just felt comfortable for me. Like once I started practicing it, it was just no problem. No problem.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, no, that makes sense. So besides fans, what are some of the things that you like to spin nowadays? I imagine you've branched off to more than just one prop.
Okay, so I actually have been really liking rope dart, and I've kind of started spinning a little bit of nunchucks. I've been practicing my handle flips with nunchucks lately, and it feels so great in your hand. Oh my gosh, it is so like satisfying getting that handle flip where you're weaving in front and back. And I'm very lucky to have Xander here because he can show me exactly how to do these things. And being a teacher himself, he explains it really well. But yeah, so I've been getting more so into more of the martial props. I love the idea that our friends are a giant ninja clan. And there's ways that I can involve, fans and folding fans into that kind of like martial arts background. But I really wanted to start getting involved with the more like understandable martial props. I'm gonna grab something really quick.
Please.
I just ordered these. So Xander and we have katana that are made out of like this plastic material that we spar with. And it's been fun doing, like sparring with swords. But it's not quite my thing. And it doesn't like, it's a little difficult for me to kind of get into the flow of things.
Sure. Yeah.
Because we telegraph all of our stuff. We don't actually spar to try to, win a match or anything.
Right.
It's more so like performance telegraphing. So I was looking at different props that I could try, and I actually got some sai.
Okay.
And so this is the new one that I'm gonna start trading with.
Okay.
And of course, now that I have these, I'm like, how can I make these into a fire prop where I'm not going to burn the crap out of myself? Yeah. So I'm currently workshopping that. And one of my close friends, Daniel Corder, just moved to Portland, and he's a prop maker. He has made all of my weird props, all of my weird fire props he has made come to life. So I'm going to be talking to him soon about that. Wicked Sticks. Yeah, that's his company. And so hopefully you'll be seeing some fire sai at some point.
I cannot wait. I always love seeing weird props. Like Corey Spins. Like he has a giant ass trident that he brings out every now and then. It's a giant ball of fire, or he has a guandao, or he has, I don't know, 17 different swords. Like every time he pulls something out is new and unique and different. Like I think there's a fire whip in there somewhere. Like there's just the amount of creativity in flow props is just astounding to me.
Yeah, I think as a community of weirdos, um, we're like, how can we make it be on fire? Like, how can we add fire to everything? And it's really interesting to see like what people come up with, and we're all like very like specific too about what's safe and what's not safe, and like we're really good about upholding that. People that play with fire, it's really funny to me that we're like some of the safest people.
Yeah.
Safe but not safe in a way.
Controlled
Because
safety.
we're playing
Yeah.
with
Controlled
fire,
risk.
but it's controlled. So but yeah, it's really interesting to see all the different weird props that people make.
Yeah.
So especially because the rule of the fire circle is like you can't be in the fire circle unless it's on fire. So people get very creative.
I've seen David Horowitz run around the fire circle with the camera and a wick on top, so it counts.
Yep, absolutely. And those are some great shots too that he gets at that point.
They're really cool. I love it so much. So speaking of companies, tell me about Starside Armory.
Yeah, so Starside Armory, I also have something very awesome to show you. Kind of just give you the background on Starside. So Starside Armory, they do a lot of 3D printed combat knives to look like Cyberpunk LED knives. They also do really cool Cyberpunk collars where it's like an oversized collar that has a lining of LEDs similar to what you would see in the game Cyberpunk 2077. They make all kinds of really cool props like that. And they do custom orders too. They'll work with you on an idea. Curtis is based out of Portland area. He is awesome. Such a creative individual. There's a couple other people too within Portland. There's Ian Madej, who has his company that he does like more so like robotic looking prop costume pieces and helmets. And then we have a couple friends from other states that do it, like Red AI. He does a lot of cyber succubus clothing props. But specifically, Curtis has been around the block for quite a while. He, a lot of the techwear scene, which is like kind of like warcore inspired clothing that is more futuristic with lots of cargo pockets and straps and stuff like that. A lot of the members of the techwear fashion community have Starside Armory knives. And that was kind of the first place that I ever saw Curtis's cyberpunk props show up. He's done a lot of really cool projects. He did a entire set of jackets for the band Motionless in White.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, and he distressed all these leather jackets, added all these like metal panels on them and gave them LED glowing collars. Just like really did up these jackets for this group, and the jackets are phenomenal looking. Curtis is a huge nerd like the rest of us. He's just like super creative, and he 3D prints stuff and does all kinds of different things. After we had our performance the first year at Neotropolis, one of our members, Co, was in contact with him and wanted to get a knife specifically made for the members of Ninja X Machina. And Curtis had more so like combat knives and cleavers and stuff like that for his LED knives. He, however, did not have any ninja styled knives. So we co-worked with him on creating a kunai blade. And this is what it looks like.
Yeah, that looks really good.
Yeah. Okay. You can kind of see he engraved it to say Ninja X Machina on our personal ones. And you can't really see it that well, but
I can see it glow. Yeah.
There we go. They're a lot brighter when it's not as light outside, but they have a ring on them so you can spin them. So I've been using these as float props and doing like really cool anti-spin stuff with them. And then adding in like strikes and like really cool combating moves within it. Xander really kind of came up with the idea with his Cyberpunk Nerf guns that he made. Calls it gun tutting. So I've been doing the same thing with my kunai, and he does it too. We're like, everything that we pick up, we're like, how can we make it a flow prop?
Classic.
How can we flow with it? But yeah, so he made these really awesome knives. They are now available on his website for purchase to the public. I believe they are. He was selling the new kunai style blades at Neotropolis as a vendor there. So yeah, and it's just like stuff like that, because we involve ourselves in the cyberpunk community and we have like an idea and a love for this genre. We meet other creatives that aren't even flow related creatives, makers of all kinds, creatives of all kinds. And we're like, how can we make something cool? How can we put our heads together to make even cooler things? So it's really awesome having that community and kind of overlapping our skill sets.
Yeah,
but
of
yeah,
course.
yes, Curtis is great. Curtis is an awesome guy. Yeah, I love Starside stuff. So
Okay, no, absolutely. I think the community and the collaboration is just, it's so important, and just the creativity that comes out of that and the collaborative efforts is just, it's fascinating. I love seeing it. So a closing tradition that I have on this show is that the previous guest leaves a question for the upcoming guest, and they don't know who is coming next. So let me find the question for you.
okay.
Doop-a-doo, doop-a-doop-a-doo. Okay, so the question left for you is, do you think that there are cultural or societal biases that influence who is recognized as a creative? And how have these biases impacted your own journey?
Okay, let me think about this.
Yeah.
Oh, I feel like having been a creative and are a creative as myself, I feel like being involved in the things that I do like, I do feel like there are quite a bit of societal pressures in terms of, when you are raised by your parents, a lot of people tell you in school and, in just society in general, you have to grow up, you gotta get a job, you gotta be, successful, you gotta make this amount of money. There's standards for how you should be living, and and to an extent that that is important. It is important to take care of yourself, but the level in which people saw material objects, at least within my life growing up in the area that I grew up in California, in Southern California specifically, being silly and being fun and creating performances and stuff like that wasn't really an option for me growing up. It was like, what college are you going to? What are you going to do for a career? Are you going to be a doctor? Are you going to be a lawyer? Are you going to be a veterinarian? And growing up, like, I felt like my creativity was stunted, and I could not actually be my authentic, genuine self. But as I got older, I realized I didn't have to listen to that. I realized all I needed to do was to take care of myself and nourish myself in the ways that I needed to. And that included flow arts and circus arts and performance arts in general. It was what made me happy. It was what made my life worth living. And so I completely discarded all of those comments from the people that I knew growing up and like just decided to rewrite my life. And there was no, I am able to have a career, but also be silly and be a child and, be a performer and bring smiles to people's faces. Yeah. And I think now that I've finally settled into that, into being a responsible adult, but also, letting my inner child out, I have not been happier. I really urge people to follow those dreams and aspirations, find that balance between, paying the bills and also having fun, because like what's it worth paying the bills and having this nice place if you can't even do fun things in it? Otherwise you're just going to work yourself to the bone and be unhappy no matter where you are. So I think it's just really important that we kind of rewrite those expectations within society. Unfortunately, with a capitalistic society, it makes it very hard to do that. But that's why we have things like Neotropolis. It's like, take off a week, take off 1 week a year, just so you can go live in another world, and bring art to that world. And I think it's important that we give ourselves, the time to do that. I know I've needed it more than ever. So.
Yeah, no, same.
Yeah.
I think, like you said, it's so important to be able to kind of figure out what you want out of your life and to step outside of the cultural expectations and norms and, societal norms, family norms, all that. And, before you take that first step outside, it is so intimidating because, you've grown up in an environment, you've had all of these pressures placed on you, whether conscious or not. And that first step is terrifying. It feels like your life is over. But once you make it through and take the next couple of steps after that, and then more after that, then you can look back and just see how different your life is between then and now, and hopefully how much happier you are. So, Alex, in wrapping up the show, where can people find you and where would you like to draw people's attention?
You can find me at Jaja PDX. That is our local Portland fire jam at the warehouse, the artist collective called The Haven. You can find me on Instagram at SuccubusLux, exactly how you think you spell it, Lux with no E at the end. That's kind of where I post my flow arts things. You can also see us post on Ninja X Machina Instagram, which is ninja.x.machina. We have a lot of really cool stories and expositions with each of our photos that we post and like backstory on our characters. So if you want to read up on our characters, go follow that page and give it a like and follow. But yeah, I will be going to Fire Drums this year and I will be at Kindle this year. So if you see me around, tap my shoulder, say hello. I would love to skill share with you guys and share stories. So yeah.
Cool. Well, Alex, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure and I'm so glad that you came on. Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye.
Sweet.